long, Robin, we mustn't dawdle. Dawdling is the devil's badminton. Holy stopwatch, Batman. We spent over an hour trying to find a way to pay for parking. The criminals are long gone by now. Surely no cop in the city would have given us a ticket.
But Robin, it is our civic duty to pay for parking. Every dime that goes to our blessed government pays for city streets and schools and sewers.
Holy humiliation, Batman. I never thought of it that way. I guess crow's on the menu tonight for me.
That's okay, Robin. You are just a small child. But we must continue fighting crime. Onwards!
What up, party people? It's your boy, MC Popsicle, and welcome to Weird Interviews. What's up, party people? It's your boy, the dirty little blueberry, MC Popsicle! Thank you. And today, I'm very excited. We are talking to Mike Allred. He is my absolute favorite comic book writer and artist. He's done Batman, Superman, Silver Surfer, and Madman. He is the best. He's the absolute best, and I'm so excited to talk to him. But first, check out my new comic book, Popsicle Ghost Just Desserts Part 3. I'm very, very proud of it. It just hit shelves. Hit me up if you want one. Also, shout out to Designs by Galarza. They make all of my hats. They do an amazing job. They can customize anything on this earth. So hit them up on Instagram. Tell them Popsicle sent you. And without further ado, Mike Allred. Hey, Mr. Allred, how you doing?
Fantastic. How are you?
Doing great. You are my favorite comic book artist, so I've been so excited to meet you.
Thank you.
This is very cool. So I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell for you for 1 second, just so you know what the score is. So I write comic books as well. I write a comic book series called Popsicle Ghost. It's
Okay.
Very colorful, very similar to style-wise what you would do, something like that. So yeah, I've been working on that for like a year, and so I just started doing that, and I've been reading your Dark Age stuff. Absolutely love it. Really, really great. You're doing a killer job. I've got Red Rocket 7. I found this the other day.
Right on.
And not all the Madman, but a lot, and some action figures. So I'm a big fan of yours. So it's very nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
So how did you first get into comics?
They've always been in my life. And my earliest clear memory is waking up in a hospital bed, and the bed was blanketed with comics. My older brother Lee, who fortunately for me has the most amazing taste in comics, always had. He knocked me off a table, landed on my head, got a concussion, and so at the hospital, he talked mom and dad into buying a bunch of comic books for me. And so from that moment on, they've just always been in my life.
Was there a specific one that really lit your fire? Was there a specific comic that was like, I love this?
Oh man, there are so many. There was a secondhand store. Of course, we didn't have comic book stores back then. And so, again, fortunately, because of Lee, I was always being introduced to the best stuff. And so if we didn't get it from the drugstore, we'd get comics secondhand at the secondhand store. I remember we had the first appearance of the Teen Titans from Brave and the Bold, illustrated by Bruno Premiani, who it remains a massive influence on me. I remember we weren't allowed to take comic books to school, and I had the very first issue of Silver Surfer that John Buscema illustrated. And so I cut out Silver Surfer off the cover and put it on my school notebook, glued it onto my school notebook. So, I mean, that was always huge for me. Those immediately jumped to mind from my childhood. Barry Windsor Smith's Conan was massive for me, and that's on my wish list. I'd love to do some early Conan stories, and so that's something I haven't been able to do. I've done a few commissions and whatnot, but I've never been able to do a full-on Conan story. But yeah, I could go on and on and on about all the comics that mean something to me and have meant something to me and continue to mean something to me.
And then you got to do the Silver Surfer.
Yeah, an amazing dream come true.
Well,
yeah,
isn't
Tom
that
Tom Brevoort and Dan Slott called me up and asked if I would be at all interested, and it was the easiest yes ever. Like, absolutely, please, let's do this. And probably ultimately the most satisfying project I've ever worked on, because from start to finish, it was so big in scope, but we had a clearly defined journey, and I was able to do every single issue without a fill-in artist, and that's the longest run of anything I've done without any guest artists. So wow. It really is very, very special to all of us.
Yes, that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. Your art style is what drew me to you initially, because of all the bright colors, and there seems to be like oh yeah, well, I love it. Like, I absolutely love it, because I'm colorblind. So
me too.
Really, that's what I was gonna ask you. Yes, I knew it. I knew it, because we like bright colors because we can see them.
Yeah,
because they think that about Van Gogh as well, because all his super bright flowers and stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when people think colorblind people only see in black and white, our brains confuse the colors. So we fully appreciate colors. Like, I love Technicolor movies where you have really dark black shadows, but then these bright colors popping out. I think of the best example is The Witch's Castle in The Wizard of Oz, where it's dark, but the colors pop. And then actually where the wizard is, that whole hallway and everything, just darkness and brightness, that contrast. And so I don't know if it's with you, but I'm like so it's difficult to tell certain colors apart. But then when I'm told what they are, my brain clicks and I learn the color. But then if I'm introduced to something else, I have to relearn the colors. But so it's an odd thing, and it's just the greatest advantage to have the best colorist in the world working with me. She's my not so secret weapon.
Yeah, she's great. Like, that was the first thing that like jumped out at me. And that's the thing with me, is like, if it's one pure color, then I can see it. But if it's like a gradient of a couple colors, then my brain's like, it doesn't know what to do with it. But also I noticed in the new Batman stuff, and in Mad Men, there's a very strong like 60s, like 70s kind of vibe to your art. What brought you to that style?
I like to regard it as timeless or classic, but it's largely because of the influences of my childhood. And I learned how to read and I learned how to draw from comic books. Our dad had the Andrew Loomis art books, and so those were helpful as well. And we would trace the figures and then design superhero costumes to draw on them. And then, of course, folding over paper and making our own comic books. And again, Lee was just hugely instrumental in my development with all that. And so that's the stuff that locked in. And then a lot of I think the greatest storytellers ever are cartoonists, like Roy Crane. who did Wash Tub and Captain Easy, and the Fantagraphics collected these beautiful Sunday funnies of Captain Easy that Roy Crane did. He's one of the big inspirations for me that most people today have never heard of, and unfortunately, it's because a lot of his stuff isn't available. Just hasn't been collected or stayed in print. Like all the Wash Tub and Captain Easy stuff was collected, but that was years ago and it hasn't been reprinted. And these are just some of the most intoxicating, addictive stories you'd ever find. I mentioned Bruno Premiani, who not just did the first Teen Titans stories, but Doom Patrol, and of course Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and Alex Toth and John Romita. All of the EC artists, Johnny Craig, Bernie Krigstein, Frank Frazetta. I'm a huge Frank Frazetta fan. I actually love his comics more than I do his paintings. And just a great storyteller. Wish he had done more comics. But it's classic. It's timeless. It's strong. It's clear. So whenever I do something fancy with the layout, it's to advance the story or to enhance a moment. It's not just weird layout for weird layout's sake. So telling a clear story is key. Making sure that the reader knows where we are and so they get invested in it emotionally and not constantly having to figure out, wait, who is this now and where are we now? I want that stuff to be very clear so that the story is something that is just flows into them, that they absorb it immediately. And I find that the storytellers who I mentioned, Will Eisner with The Spirit, they have just a very powerful, strong, anchored way of telling a story. And so that's what I always attempt to do. And so that would be why that particular style, I think, is most prevalent in my work.
Yeah, it's very good. It reminds me of like Andy Warhol some, which I love. He's one of my favorites, and that's kind of something that I think of when I look at it. Also, the flow of your comics is very good. You have this intuition of like from panel to panel, like how to get people to follow really easily. Like even if stuff's happened in between the two, you know what people have caught on to and what they haven't. It's really good because that was something that I had been trying to learn when I was writing my comics. Because I was like, do I need to, if they're walking, do I need to get every stroke in or like? But that was something that I kind of learned from you.
Well, good, because I've learned from these artists that I mentioned before, and it's very musical. For me, storytelling is it's about pace and it's about the panels are notes, and for instance, and cinematic as well. Like you'd learn from Will Eisner that you can make something slow motion by multiple panels. Say a punch is being thrown. You can show that punch being thrown through 5, 6, 7, 10, 18 panels. It creates a slow motion effect. Or a jump cut where you see somebody cock their fist back and then you see their target laid out on the floor in the next panel. So it's bam. So again, it's all about rhythm and music and pop. By being able to break up time like that by the use of panels and layouts, that's very key to creating motion and power in a story.
Yes. Another thing that I like about your work is all of the characters that I've read of yours have a very rich internal life because you get to see what they're thinking and you're almost seeing what they're thinking more than what they're saying. And I really appreciate that. And it's very neat because it's a whole nother level you get into that I really appreciate about your work.
I'm glad you noticed because these are tools in the toolbox, and illustrating a comic book is like directing a movie, and I'm making the characters act. It's very important that you can read their faces, what they're feeling, and so you want to be able to access all of these elements in a story, and So it's nothing's farted out from me. Everything is pure passion, and truly, um, my goal is whatever's in front of me. I want it to be the best thing I've ever done, and so I access those tools, and then with each project and each new collaboration, I learn new things. I'm constantly growing and advancing, and again, I want what I do tomorrow to be better than what I did today.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest things that I learned from your characters is how to lead that internal life. I think that is very it draws you in very well. Was Madman your first comic? What was your first comic that you ever did? Or do you
First comic I
remember?
ever did was a graphic novel called Dead Air, which was about a DJ who there was a story on 60 Minutes that said that Roseburg, Oregon would be the safest place in the event of a nuclear disaster, a nuclear war, because because of the natural lay of the land, the environment, and also the lack of military targets. And the way the valley lays out and stuff. And so I thought, whoa, if end of the world, and I was born in Roseburg, Oregon. So I'm thinking, and I was a DJ. I was worked at the radio station, and
Me too.
so
Right now.
okay, good. And so yeah, just that idea popped in my head about the end of the world. And so then that dead air is when there's nothing being broadcast.
Right.
And so we would get network news at the top of the hour. And so I was thinking, well, what if we turned to it and it wasn't there? And then no outside information was coming in, that all communication was cut off from the world. And this lead character, his family has left town. And so he and they shut off the town because they don't want anybody to, they want to contain the safety of the town. So he has to get out of town and go looking for his family. And we find out that it is the end of the world, but it's a whole other kind of end of the world. So that was, and when I was doing that, I originally started writing it as a screenplay. And my best buddy, Charlie Custis, was huge into comic books, which I'd given up years before because Marvel killed off Gwen Stacy, which was very traumatic for me. And so I was like, no, and I spent all my money on record albums after that. Anyway, I got back into comics because Charlie Custis gave me so many wonderful things that were being done at the time. And Watchmen had 2 more issues left to go. That's when this was happening. He gave me Frank Miller's Daredevil. He gave me Mr. X by the Hernandez brothers. And then he introduced me to Steve Siegel, my first professional. He had his very first book published. It was called Kafka. And Steve later went on to co-create Ben 10 and Big Hero 6. Wow. And it was through him that I got my first page rate gig, and that's how I left broadcasting to become a cartoonist. But it was because of them that I got back into comics. And at that time, I was writing Dead Air as a screenplay, and I was storyboarding it. And so Charlie and Steve were very encouraging in that, hey, make it a comic book. And so I thought, okay, cool. And I thought it'd be something that I could get published and point at and go, I did that. And so I never intended it as any kind of career. I didn't know how to make it a career. But upon finishing it, I was bitten by the bug, the comic book bug. And ever since then, I've just had this intense desire to get better, to do better. And so I started doing other work, and I did my own anthology, Graphique Musique. We were in Europe at the time, where I was a TV reporter, and we were in Paris, and there was right next to each other a music shop and a graphics shop, art supply store, and then Graphique Musique, and I realized that's how I see comic books, is graphic music. And so with that, I experimented telling different stories, and inspired by Love and Rockets, which, by the Hernandez brothers. Any kind of story, they can tell any kind of story they want. They have main characters that they largely stick with, but they can also take these left turns, and I was very inspired by that. So I did graphic music, phonetically spelled, after we got back to the States. And that's where that, along with a one shot called Creatures of the Id, introduced my character Frank Einstein, and he quickly became my favorite character. And then when my kids were interested in what I was doing and showing their friends what I was doing, I realized I wanted to do stuff that appealed to me and my adult sensibilities, but also is accessible to kids the way comic books were to me when I was a kid. And so I just thought I'll throw a costume on my favorite character, Frank Einstein, and that's when Madman came to be. And Kevin Eastman, who co-created the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he had a publishing entity called Tundra, and I met him in San Francisco at a show, and had I'd made these glow in the dark T-shirts, and I made a fake comic book cover, and explained to him what I wanted to do with this, and he jumped at it, and could not have been more supportive. They promoted the heck out of it. It was hugely successful, and then when he gave up on Tundra, Dark Horse, which is local, it's an Oregon publisher. Thanks to Bob Schreck and Mike Richardson, they pulled me in there, and then the Legend imprint guys, Frank Miller, Mike Mignola, Walt Simonson, Paul Chadwick, Art Adams, Jeff Darrow, Dave Gibbons. They invited me into that imprint group, and threw this giant spotlight on me, and just a great example of the generosity of the people in this business that are keen to lift you up when they enjoy what you do. And so that's really how Madman then became even bigger and more successful, and something that I can always lean on.
I love Madman, and I love Kevin Eastman. He's been on the show as well. He was very, very kind. I like him a lot.
I owe so much to him. He's just wonderful. He's a hero.
Yes, mine as well. So when you make something like Madman or anything, is this something that has been floating around in your mind for years? Because when I started doing my comic, this was a character. Popsicle Ghost is his name. And I've been incubating it in my head for like 10 years. So I have stuff from like 10 years ago that I had drawn, just like a crude version of it. Is it like that with you, or are you just pumping stuff out?
My brain it's very spontaneous and accumulates very quickly. When I have an idea and then I start working on it, it builds up from there. I can't think of anything that, my older brother has some of the characters that he created when he was a kid. I can't recall any that I created. And we did dozens of them. Dozens and dozens of them. And I wish so bad that I kept that stuff, or somebody had, or I knew where it was. No, and then what I eventually learned and accepted was that Frank Einstein was a cipher for me, that he was, through him, I could really get, he's the creation that's closest to me of all of my creations. Of course, there's a lot of me in all of my creations, as any, writer would tell you, that of course, it's who they are. It's why it's unique, but you're inspired by other people, and that's how you develop these other characters. But with Frank Einstein, he quickly became this weapon, this tool to filter my feelings and thoughts and philosophies and concerns and questions through.
That's what when I read it, that was very striking to me, and I felt very close to Madman. I feel like he and I would get along really well, and that's why I wanted to meet you so much, because I feel like comics are such a window to the soul. I was like, I like this guy. I already like him. I haven't met him yet, but I like him, and I feel like I felt like a kindred spirit with him, and through that, you as well.
Well, maybe you'd like me then.
Yeah, no, I do. Like this has been very interesting and very cool to meet you, because I was like, this guy is someone that is similar to me, and I'm kind of out there, so I don't say that very often. So I was very excited to meet you for that reason. So one of the other things that jumped out at me about Madman. So first of all, the way I got into Madman was years and years and years ago in college. My friend gave me a Madman comic, and I was like, "This looks neat. I like this." And so I just continued my life path. He continued his, and he got into this biohacking company where they would inject, like, take people's antibodies that were not catching certain diseases and then give those antibodies to people that were getting the diseases. And they were saying that that's the way to cure some diseases, which makes sense to me. But so he was getting big, and they actually have some stuff about him on Netflix. And then they found him dead in a sensory deprivation chamber, and he had drowned in like 5 inches of water.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it's very suspect, very weird. But I was thinking about him during the time that that happened, and I found that comic, the Madman comic. And then I found an action figure, and the look of it was very striking to me. I hadn't like really read through it, but recently, over the past couple months, I re-remembered it, and that's what got me into Madman. That crazy story that I just told you. But I really, really love it, and he has become my favorite superhero. But what made you design him? Because his look is very striking, and his powers are very crazy. And like, I don't even know all the powers that he has. I don't know if he knows all the powers he had. But what led you to make him look that way and give him the powers that he has?
Well, originally he was going to be called the Spook. I always, again, I was a fan of Will Eisner's The Spirit, and met him before my first work was published. He was promoting a documentary on comics called Comic Book Confidential in Europe. He had a signing. We got to meet him, and then when we became professionals and started going to shows, we were constantly meeting up with him, and he was, keeping track of my career, my development, and so I loved the name The Spook in homage to the spirit, and wanted him to kind of have a skeletal appearance. So if you look at the early costume, he's all white. The stitches in his mouth suggest teeth. The black around the eyes are like the cavities in an eye socket, and then there were stripes on his sides that suggested ribs. And but then when at Tundra, there was a file, an intent to use of that name when we went to trademark it. And so Catcher in the Rye is one of my favorite books, and Holden Caulfield, the protagonist, is constantly using madman as an expression. Like, ran like a madman, flew off like a madman, madman. And I was like, dang, that'd be a great name for a comic book character. And so I asked if that was available, and they said it was, and so it got shifted to Madman. For a week, we were going to call it the Goon.
I like that.
Yeah. And I wrote the intro to one of Eric Powell's Goon collections, and relate that story, and even showed the logo that I had created for the Goon. I've created almost every logo for every series I've been on, like the Silver Surfer logo. In fact, Tom Brevoort asked me to design the Squirrel Girl logo, which I did. But yeah, I always like integrating logos, and that's one of the fun things about designing things. But so when he became Madman, I'd already drawn most of that first series, and where it was intended to be the Spook. In fact, when I first met Kevin Eastman, the glow-in-the-dark shirt that I made said the Spook on it. So with Madman, I realized, well, I could really go, in other directions with this. I always had the exclamation bolt on the chest, which is one of my favorite things I've ever created. Just
it's awesome. It's simple, and it's effective, and it's great. I love logos and stuff. Like, I love graphic design. It's good. I like it.
Yeah, we've made dozens and dozens of T-shirt designs over the year, and the simple exclamation bolt by far always outsells everything. It's just because it's just so simple and iconic. And so I'm really happy that that was something that came to be. But then from there, and our first, the next series, Madman Adventures, it actually starts off with his girlfriend making a bunch of costumes for him. So we so I was at that point thinking, well, I'm going to see what else I can do with the costume. And ultimately, when Alex Toth, who became a mentor to me and would guide me on what I was doing and was very supportive and wonderful, he said he loved the design because it was a reverse silhouette. And
Yeah.
when he said that, I was like, well, I'm going to stick with that then. And then, even though I've played with what he wears from time to time, I've very much stuck with the all white costume. And ironically, or subconsciously, Space Ghost. Alex Toth created Space Ghost, and it is
Ah.
originally Space Ghost was all white. He didn't have the black helmeted cowl.
Hmm.
And I think the powers that be talked him into doing the black helmeted cowl because the Batman TV show was so popular at the time. But yeah, so it's very much thanks to Alex Toth and Space Ghost that he's all white.
Wow. What about the powers? How did you think of that?
Oh well, I love Daredevil because there's something accessible about it. The exact opposite example of that would be Superman, where over time they made Superman so powerful there was no conflict. They had to come up with incredibly ridiculous things to challenge Superman. And when that happens, it becomes harder and harder to identify with the character. So you may aspire to be Superman. I love Superman. Obviously, a big Superman fan. Superman Space Age is one of my favorite things I've ever done, and working with Mark Russell on that and Batman, one of the greatest joys of my life and career. But for me, in order for me to relate to the character, I want it to be as close to believable as possible. And a lot of the drive of the story is him trying to figure out who he is. And through my whole life, I've tried to figure out who I am. Like, what is life? What is existence? What is who are we? Why are we here? Why am I the way I am? Why are you the way you are? And identity and all that stuff. And so for me, I wanted him to just be enhanced to where we learned that he had this previous existence before he was resurrected by the scientists, that he was a trained, I wouldn't say an assassin, but an agent, but with very enhanced skills just simply from training. But the process that resurrected him enhanced those abilities. And so and this is where I would say he's like Daredevil, where, he's just that much faster. He's that much more alert. With Daredevil, it's the loss of his sight that he has enabled him with this other ability with the radar and whatnot, where he can actually see things and sense things better than our sight would. So with that and the existential themes of the stories, I was inspired to play with the third eye, which at times will, technically we all have access to that, but don't have the ability, skill, or training to access it. His literally comes out of his forehead, and then when he's just super sensitive and touching somebody, so there's just these enhanced psychic abilities, mental abilities, physical abilities. So he's like a normal person, but has everything just kind of cranked up to 11.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really like the characters in Madman are very kind. Like, they're very nice. Like Joe and Madman, they're very friendly characters, and all of them are really. I mean, not the bad guys, but I like that they have a good heart to them, and I really appreciate that. Like, they're very friendly, which is really cool. And speaking about new stuff, the Batman Dark Age, you have a lot of scale and a lot of scope in it in the ones that have come out so far because you're covering like everything and it's done so well and so naturally. And also you've changed up some stuff which I've enjoyed and I've liked it a lot. But how do you mentally, for me to write a character, I have to be the character on the inside. I have to figure out who they are and how they think and kind of be them so I can write. And how do you do that with a character like Batman? Who do you think Batman is?
Yeah, well, so much is legend, so much is just so locked in, and we know the story. You know, becoming an orphan and largely raised by Alfred and his butler, and having access to certain things where a lot of his abilities are bought, but of course he's self-trained, and in our story, it's his Ra's al Ghul and his training in Vietnam so for me, it's like you were saying, you have to think like the character, like with the, well, Joe, for instance, his girlfriend, I will ask myself, what would Laura do? What would Laura think? Because Joe is very much Laura. And so I try to get inside her mind and what would motivate her, what would inspire her, what would make her decide to do certain things or say certain things. And you just do that with all the characters. And with Batman and Bruce Wayne, of course, Mark Russell writing the scripts, it's all there on the page, but I still have to, absorb it. I still have to get in those shoes. I still have to feel it. I still have to be motivated by it. The way an actor, would get into a character. I have to do that with all of the characters, and very much just do that with Bruce Wayne. And so when the events that sculpt his life take place, I would imagine, well, how would I feel? How would I react to that? And it's just like that with every character in every story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. Like, because I still see you through your work. I can tell that it's you, but it's also I can tell it's a different person as well. But I see your like spirit in it, and it's very interesting to me how you can do that. But so as far as the timeline for the new Batman, what was the why then? Like what it because it's not current day, kind of, but kind of not, and it spans back through like the 60s and the 70s and all that. Why did y'all land on that timeline
Oh,
specifically?
well, because of the crisis of Infinite Earth, there was the series in the 80s where DC just shook everything up. And there was always the Earth 1, Earth 2 stuff going on. And since then, we've all gotten involved in multiverses and that sort of thing. So by tapping into the multiverses, we can do different variations of established iconic characters. And because of the crisis story where everything ends, and for these particular universes, they also take place during very specific decades and eras. So we go through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and everything ends in the 80s, and that's when this original Crisis series took place with DC. So that's where we can twist and turn and spin things, and where we can be very faithful to certain aspects of these characters, but at the same time, we can take a left turn here and there. We can have them involved in a particular real life event because there's no rules, because this is another universe that didn't have the exact events of say the canon stories that we're all used to and aware of. So it just really freed us up to really play with this. And the last issue of Batman Dark Age is, I think it's going to be out in a couple weeks or so.
Yeah.
It has one of the coolest twist endings ever. I'm so thrilled with it. And like when people are reading the story and they know that because of Superman Space Age in that universe, and when everything ends there, they know that Batman in Dark Age, when we see him as an elderly man, how is that possible? Because so did this universe get saved, spared from from the horrors of the events? What happened that allowed him to get that old? And that's the main underlying mystery of the entire Dark Age run. So how that is revealed, I'm just thrilled with, and I'm excited for people to see it.
Ooh, I'm excited. I'm very excited. So, through your time, you've been doing comics for a minute now, and I'm new to this. I've been doing it like a year. I've been self-publishing and, I've been going door to door to comic book stores and getting them to carry my books and stuff like that. So, what are some lessons that you've learned over your career for like writing or getting your work out there or just story in general that you would tell somebody like me that's new to this stuff?
Man, the way I did it doesn't exist anymore. It was all old school. I've been doing comics full time since January of 1990, and back then was at the tail end of that initial indie boom. And a lot of, if it wasn't Marvel and DC, it was probably a black and white smaller publisher, and then just getting out to the comic book shows, and also back then the shows were more intimate. Like if you were a guest at a show, the organizers would usually have all the guests at a dinner the day before or something. So you're hanging out with all the other guests. And so like one show, I got to hang out with most of the cast from Star Wars. So,
wow.
Yeah, and me and my son went on a tour with Peter Mayhew, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, Dave Prowse was on crutches, I remember. Jeremy Bullock, the original Boba Fett. And we're just like, this is unreal that this is happening. At a Dark Horse show, we got to hang out with Mark Hamill, for an entire evening. And so that happens less and less because the shows have gotten so big and so spread out. So it's harder to, make your best friends in the world are these people that oftentimes you only ever see at a show. And so you have to really carve out time to, get a dinner together here, or, hey, let's meet for breakfast tomorrow, that kind of thing. And it becomes harder and harder to do. And because there's so much more I want to do, I've actually increased my productivity, become an efficiency expert over the years. And so we do fewer and fewer appearances as well. So I think we average 2 shows a year at the most anymore, because so much as we want to, be doing at home and with the family and everything and our friends here. So, and getting established in a career, what helped me was meeting these folks, meeting Matt Wagner, meeting Neil Gaiman, and meeting the editors like Shelley Bond, who was my very, very first editor, and Diana Schutz, Bob Schreck, and Jamie S. Rich, and Karen Berger. And, when you run into these people and, sometimes you click, and if they like your work, or a lot of times they would contact me after the success of Madman. It was like, well, let's see if he'd want to do this. So I was there at the beginning of Vertigo when DC created that imprint. And so it really was a lot of just making friends like you do when you move from junior high to high school, and you're in this bigger environment, but you gravitate towards the people that you relate to the most and have the most in common with. And so that's kind of how it, again, like I told you, just running into Kevin Eastman at a WonderCon show, and I made a fake, I printed a cover at, Kinko's and put it in a bag so it looked like a real comic book. And then I had the Glow in the Dark Spook T-shirt on. With foam core, I'd cut out, a torso, and to put the shirt on, and so at Artist Alley, that was behind me. And so, what's the spook? So people would come by, what's the spook? And in big, letters, it's like glow in the dark T-shirt, the spook. So even though people didn't know what it was, of course, it had never come out, it didn't exist, but they still wanted a cool glow in the dark T-shirt, right? So we were selling T-shirts like crazy, but there was no book that existed, not for Spook or Mad Men yet. But it allowed me to, Greg Basin, who was the editor in chief for Tundra, he saw it, arranged a meeting with Kevin. Kevin dug it, and so that's where that took off. I'm so low tech. Like starting out here, I couldn't get my laptop to hook up with you. So I'm on my phone now, and luckily that worked. I'm not good at this stuff. I got through the whole pandemic, never did a single Zoom anything.
Wow.
And then last year there was an original art show in the Original Art Expo in Florida. And I was so excited about that I agreed to have people hook me up for interviews to promote it and stuff, and found I enjoy this. So it is a nice opportunity to reach out and talk with folks like you, and if nothing else, to thank you for enjoying my work and promoting it and spreading the word. So that, I think, is the world you live in now, and where you're reaching out through social media and that sort of stuff, which is something that I do very little of. But that is definitely what I would be doing if I was trying to get my work seen today. Just trying to get that word of mouth going, getting on the different social media things and showing. But for me, it was absolutely about going to, San Diego Comic-Con and WonderCon and all of the different shows and accepting invitations all over the country, all over the world. Lauren, I've seen the world. Because of all the places we've been invited to, and so I'm thrilled with everything that's laid out for us. But if I had to start over again, man, I would just have to crash course it. I'd have to figure out, how do I do this? So that's where you are, because I don't. This is all new to me. This whole what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
But I'm getting better at it. I've done a few of these now, and I think I know how it works. But my buddy Brian Hubert, he's a computer genius. I'm gonna have to ask him, why is my laptop not hooking up with Zoom? I did something a couple of days ago, and it was through StreamYard.
Oh, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, well, I got an email and it had the link. I clicked the link on my laptop, and bang, I was there. But in this case, it just kept saying Zoom quit report, Zoom quit report. I don't know what that stuff means. But here we are. My phone worked, so
we did it. Also, I was gonna say, I'm from New Orleans. Like, that's where I am. And if you ever write more Batman stuff, you should come visit New Orleans, because it is Gotham City through and through. I'm
Really?
just telling you. Yeah, there's some places here that you just turn a corner and you're like, wow, like I'm in the middle of Gotham City. It's not as big as Gotham, but the feel of it, the like half fallen in kind of place, and the crime.
Man.
We got that too, the crime.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Whenever I think of New Orleans, I think of all the films that have shot around the French Quarter, like Cat People, stuff like that. But yeah,
it's beautiful. Like it's weird. It's a good mix. It's a mix of like ugly and beautiful and dirty and scenic. It's this weird combination of all these things. So if you ever do any more of that stuff, look at some stuff in New Orleans. It'll give you some ideas, guaranteed. But thank you so much for doing this. Like I said earlier, you really are my favorite comic book artist. So this is a great honor for me. And I really, really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. I appreciate your interest and your support and your kind words. It means a lot.
You got it. Well, have a good day. I will look forward to the rest of Dark Age, and hopefully I'll see you at a convention or something down the road.
Okay, get your local New Orleans show to invite us.
I will do that. I'll
right.
talk to him. God, thank you, sir. I'll talk to
They
you
they got
later.
it. If they fly as first class and we can work it into our schedule, good chance we'll go.
I will. Okay, I will do every single thing within my power to make that happen.
All right.
Have a good day, buddy. I'll
You
talk
too.
to you later. Bye bye.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
And that's about it, everybody. Thank y'all so much for watching. Thank you, Mr. Mike, for coming on. It was just a blast to talk to you. I'm so happy we got to do that. Also, follow the Facebook page, MC Popsicles World. Follow it right now. Send it to all your friends. And without further ado, the sponsors. First thing is I would like to give a very special shout out to my new sponsor, Big Ideas Consulting. Make money and grow your business the smart way with Big Ideas Consulting. Please check out Ramicus.com for all the MC Popsicle merchandise. We got buttons, shirts, phone cases, posters, everything. So make sure to get on over to Ramicus.com and get you something. Stop! Before you do anything else, check this out. This is a vintage 90s Ninja Turtle figure that was modeled after the turtles from the movie. I love it. And this is a newer turtle figure. I also love it. You should go to the Toy Stash on Instagram and follow them. They have vintage and new toys. And if you're a toy collector like me, you need to know about them. Follow them on Instagram right now. Another thing you need to do is check out Step On It Rugs on Instagram. They are insane. They made me an MC Popsicle rug. Anything you can imagine, they can make a rug for it. Hit them up. Also, shout out to my shoe sponsor, SoulSphin. They make amazing future sneakers that are just bananas. Please follow them on Instagram. You will love their selection.